Hi everybody, my name's Albert. In case you don't know me, or in case you do know me, but you've just maybe kind of forgotten a little bit, I'm a fourth year here at Ontario Tech University, currently studying the same degree that you guys are, video game and game development and interactive media. I specialize in computer graphics and a few other things here at OTU. I'm also an executive of the GAC Art Club. Today, however, I'm going to be showing you guys a quick tutorial on technical art and specifically shaders. So what is technical art, or computer graphics in this case? It's a field of game development and 3D media that just primarily covers things such as particle effects, shaders, and other visual effects. Today, however, we're just going to be covering one of the most used things, which is shaders. So what are shaders and what can they do for you? So simply put, a shader is a computer program that kind of defines how certain visual information should be represented on your screen. Things such as color, light, and other things are kind of defined under shaders. You can see here on the right, we have an example of some of the different things that are defined by shaders. So what kind of things can be done by shaders besides this? So toon shading, typically seen in games like Hi-Fi Rush and a lot of other indie games that have maybe comic type 3D assets. Pixelation is another big one, also used in 3D games with that want to go with a retro feel. You'll see a lot of pixelation in that front. Off the top of my head, games like Signalis are a big proponent of this effect. And another just more minor thing, but might be really useful for some of you guys, is the changing of colors of textures. Some of you guys might be, you know, manually changing the color of your textures in a program such as Blender or Adobe like Painter or something like that. But here you can just do that for free without having to do any of that. So first thing first, how to create a shader. So what you're going to want to do is if you want to create a shader, what we're going to want to do first is we're going to want to go to content and maybe make a new folder here. I've made a folder already called materials. Um, and what we can do with this material is don't worry about this material here. This is not a default Unreal material. I just have this as a way to reference information for you guys. But what we can do is we can create a new material. So if we right click here, we can create a material, or if you want to have a few more options, and we will be exploring some of these options, you can go down here to create advanced asset, and you see here that we're going to have a bunch of different materials that we can use here. But for now, let's just create a basic material. We're going to call this material basic color changing. And now you can see here, we have basic color changing. I'm just going to quickly grab out the few windows here, just so I have some reference for all of us later. So you can see here that we have just a really simple material. So if we want to change the color of this material, what we can do is we can click 1 and left click, or sorry, rather 3 and left click, and this will create a really simple color asset. You can then plug this into our base color, and we can change our material to any color we want. So if we were to now apply this, save it. If we go over here and just drag it onto this cube, now you can see that this cube is now orange. Nice. A few other things we can do is that we can also make it metallic. If we apply this now, you can see that, and we save. See that now our cube is a little bit metallic. But what you're probably here to see is how can we apply this to a texture? So I'm just going to quickly break this link. I'm going to create a new color material. Or sorry, I'm going to create a new texture. So we're going to call this a texture sample. Then what we can do is we can we can plug in our RGB here. We can plug that into base color. You'll see here that we're missing an input texture. That's perfectly normal. You can just select here any texture you want. I'm just going to really go with, how about this metal texture here? There you go, metal aluminum. Nice. So now we have this. So what we can do is that this color is a little muted currently. It's not really super bright. So if we want to saturate our color a little bit more, what we can do, I'm just going to do a little bit of ordering here. It doesn't matter which order, by the way, you add the RGB or the B here. All that matters is that you just have a all that matters is you just plug these two values in. But let's say you want to saturate your color a little bit more. We can do. We can add a color. Or sorry, we can add multiply function here. Plug this in here. We can multiply this by like 2. Or, I don't know, let's just multiply this by 100 even. You can see here that it's a little more pink now. Change this to blue, maybe. There you go. Now we have a really simple way to add onto or saturate it a little bit more. We can also, if we really want to, just plug this value into here, or multiply. We just plug the multiply value into our base color. That makes it super, super, super duper saturated. So, this is a really simple way to just change the colors of your textures. If you don't want to change the color, you can just make this white, you can make it red. But let me show you guys something really cool that you might not have known that you could do before if you ever have messed around with materials. So what we can do is, first things first, we're going to want to right click on our color here, and we're going to convert this to a parameter. We're also going to want to do this to our texture sample. We're going to call this parameter texture. And we're also going to want to go to this parameter and call this color. Perfect. We can then drag this away just for a moment. Create a material. We're going to call this and then we can go scroll down here to our advanced assets, and we can create a material function. So we can call this a basic color changing function. Perfect. Now, if we open this up, oh, sorry, not a material function, rather. Sorry. That was the wrong one. It's a material instance. Sorry. Basic color change instance. Save it. If we open this up, see here now, we have a really simple material, but we don't have any of this blueprint. So what happened? This essentially is an instance of the material we just created. It's a great way to create multiple versions of the same material that don't take up as much space or as much code or anything like that, as much storage, as the original material that you had. So for example, instead of just creating multiple materials of the exact same type, what you can do is you can create material functions. And if they stay in the shared functionality, you can just use that instead. So what we can do is, if we just want to have a really simple material where all we do is just change the color and the texture of it, we can put this onto a material instance. We can then bring this over quickly, drag this into over here, and now, now we can just change the color of this. We can even go into here. We can change the texture. Let's go with kind of a Perlin noise texture this time, maybe. There we go. Change the color of it, change the texture of it, and create multiple of these instances as well. And these all use the same base material. So you still do have to create this basic material, right? You still do have to just make a really simple material, but this provides you a really easy way to, change all of the parameters and all of the texture, whatever you might want to change, right, in a material in a really simple way. And we're going to be using this a lot today. So that's a really simple material. But let's say, for example, you want to have some more of those cool effects, pixelation or color changing as an example. Well, what we can do is we can create a new material. We can go over to material, and we're just going to call this pixelation underscore pp, standing for post-process. So what is post-processing? So unlike other materials, right? So these are called what I like to call, or what a lot of the people in the computer graphics and visual effects world like to call, surface shaders. Surface shaders are essentially affecting an object. Post-process materials affect your entire screen, essentially. Think of it kind of like an Instagram filter, if you will. It kind of filters out the image. It filters your image and provides a different kind of looking image based on your original. So if we open up our pixelation post-processing, there is something first that you need to do. So the very first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to change your material domain from surface to post-process. So this is really important. This is required because if you don't have this on, this material just straight up won't work. It won't actually post-process anything. But now you can see that when we did that, hey, our screen disappeared. What happened? Well, remember what I said about an Instagram filter? Think about it like this. Our Instagram filter needs the basic image in order for us to see it, right? But we can't currently see that image. So what can we do? Well, we can type in a thing called a scene texture. Scene texture. We can change this from scene texture to, we want to change this scene texture ID to post-process input 0. And we want to drag in the color into our emissive color. And there we go. Now we've got a really simple, now we've got our image. This quote unquote is our original image. But how can we edit this image? How can we make it to where it pixelizes our screen? Well, what we can do is we can go to type in another function called screen position. And we're going to have to do a little bit of math here, but don't worry, it's nothing complicated. So first things first, we're going to want to multiply this information. Then we're going to want to floor it. And then divide it. We are then going to want to create just a really simple function here. Or rather, what we can do is, if we plug this in now, you'll already see we change this multiplication value to like 100 or something, plug this into our UVs here. There we go. Now it's already pixelizing our screen. So how can we make it to where we can change this parameter most easily? If you click on 1 and left click and drag this value in, change this to like 200. There we go. Now we have, just to make it a little more obvious, now we have a really easy pixelation effect already done. Just to explain a little bit more for the technical people, in case you guys are interested, all this is doing is essentially we are taking the screen position and we are essentially what we're doing is we are first increasing the resolution of our screen. This will essentially make it to where we are increasing the resolution of our screen, so therefore our pixels will be more scrunched up and bundled together. They're larger pixels. Then we're going to floor this information, and then we are dividing back to fix for this information. So essentially what we're doing is we are multiplying the UVs of our screen that then generates larger UVs or pixels on our screen. We then floor this information, and then after that we correct for this information. So we correct our resolution to be the proper resolution for what our screen would be, and we then divide that information, plug it into our UVs for our, this is essentially the filter, and this is essentially the image, and then we plug that into our result. And then you are left with a pixelation effect. Very nice. But let's say, so how do we actually apply this pixelation effect? You can see here that if I just throw this onto an object or something, it's just black. It doesn't do anything. Well, what we can do is we're going to want to use something called so if we click on here, quickly add to the project, we go to visual effects, you can see here we have something called a post-process volume. Unreal, very nicely, already has a really simple way to actually just put in effects into your post-process. Or your post-process effects into an actual thing for you to do. Very nice. So first things first, if you want your visual effect to affect the entire screen, we're going to search up here in our post-process volume, unbound, and we're going to click this option here, infinite extent unbound. This is important because otherwise, if you don't click on this, it's just not going to process your visual effects across the entire screen. If you just want it to be a localized visual effect or post-process effect just in a certain area, you can also just you can also just unclick this, and this instead, this area here of this post-process volume will be where the effect takes place. You could do some really creative stuff with that, but I won't be showing you guys how to do that. I'm just going to be showing you guys how to create the visual effect and implement it. So the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to search up material, and then we have our post-process materials here. So if we want to add to this array, if we want to choose an asset reference, now we can drag in our material, and there we go. Everything is now pixelized. So if we run it into our game here, you see here that all of our objects are now pixelized. Pretty strongly, to be fair, but what we can do, if you want a really easy way to change this, is, again, you can create a material instance. So first thing first, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to promote this to a parameter. We're just going to call this parameter pixelation. Oops, caps lock. And then we're going to click a material. We're going to create a material instance. Pixelation underscore pp instance underscore instance. Save that. pp pixelation pp. Change the, and we could just keep this to 150 for now, but now if we go to our post-process volume, we just plug in our instance instead. You can now more easily, just going to change this so everybody can see it a little easier. You can now more easily up our pixelation, lower our pixelation even more, anything we want. It's very nice. Simple way to have pixelation on your screen. So now I want to show you guys how to do cell shading. Bear with me. This is a pretty long effect, but I'm sure you guys can get through it, and the results are pretty worth it. So first things first, we're going to want to create another material. We're going to call this our Toon Shade PP. Open it up. And now what we can do is we're going to want to, once again, obviously since this is a post-process effect, we're going to want to change this from a surface to a post-process. We're going to want to scroll down here, however, and we're going to want to change our post-process material from after tone mapping to before translucency. This is an extremely important step. Do not forget this. As a post-process material, we're going to want to change our blendable location from after tone mapping to before translucency, okay? Make sure you don't forget that step or this effect will break. Wonderful. Now then, we can actually get started with the effect. So first things first, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a few post-process inputs here. Post-process inputs. Or, sorry, not post-process, scene textures, rather. There's going to be multiple different versions of the scene texture, but this is the long and short of it. So we're going to want to have a scene texture with a post-process input 0. I'm going to copy and paste this. We're going to want to have a scene texture with a specular for lighting. This is because if you didn't do this, our specular lighting would break. And for those of you who kind of want reflections, you can add that on, or your specular lighting, you can add that on. So specular for lighting. And then we're going to have one more scene texture. This one is going to be our diffuse color. Okay, perfect. I'm also just going to move this away a little bit. Wonderful. Now then, let's first focus on these two here, our scene texture post-process input 0 and our scene texture diffuse color. We're going to want to desaturate this first. We're going to want to desaturate both of them, actually. Wonderful. Next, we're going to want to drag that out, divide it. Then we're going to add that information. Or, sorry, rather. Then, now, we're going to want to go up here, click on search up mask, component mask, open up this drop-down menu and unclick G. We only want red. Multiply. Then we want to create a value here. So again, press 1 and left click to create just a simple value. This value is going to be 0.5. And then we're going to drag this out into a multiply. Drag that divide in there. Now, if we just plug this in really quick, right? If we just plug this result, you can see here that we have a gray, essentially a gray ball and the rest of our world is kind of gone. It's kind of desaturated. So right now, what this is essentially telling our code to do is that we are trying now to just essentially separate out our color values from our light values. That's the most important thing we're trying to do right now, because that way we can actually set it to where our light values and our color values will be separate. And we can actually make it to where we have toon shading separated from our color, and then we will reapply color after this effect is done. Now then, what we're going to want to do from here is we are going to want to create a bit of a large sort of function. First things first, we're going to want to drag out this multiply. Drag this out and create an addition. Make this the B, and then create another scene texture as your A. We're going to break this length for our UVs. We're going to make this a post-process input 0. Perfect. And now, what we're going to want to do is our function. So this might take a moment, so just be aware, but it shouldn't take too long. We're going to want to create if statement. This add will be our A is more than B. Our B value is going to be a brand new value. Okay. And our A value is going to be dragged out from our multiply. We're going to do an addition. Drag out our divide. And then add this to our A. Okay. So again, just as a quick recap, because I know that was a lot in a little bit. First things first, drag out your multiply into an add function. Put that into your B value. Your multiplier is going to be your B value. Your this scene texture post-process input 0 is going to be your A value. Next, we're going to have another value here that is going to be our B value for an if statement. And our A value is going to be a addition from your multiply and divide. Okay? Next, your if A is less than B statement, we're going to have a multiply. Okay? We're going to want to have another base value. And we're going to want to have a scene texture. Scene texture. That is going to be called a diffuse color. Okay? So what does this do? What did this just do? Well, if we plug in this if statement into our emissive color, you can see here that we have the ground again, which is nice, but we have this really bright object. I wonder what would happen if we perhaps just changed these values quickly. 7.5 and 3.5. Hey, our color's a lot less bright now. What happened? Well, what we're doing here essentially is we're now essentially sectioning off the different values of light that are related to our if statement. What this essentially is the different tints to toon shading. So just in case you guys need a quick explanation for what that means, let me open up Ace right here just for a moment so I can explain. We're going to create a 100 by 100 pixel sprite just so I can kind of explain to you guys. Don't worry, this isn't part of your tutorial. I just want to explain a little bit of the theory. If you're not interested in this, just skip forward to where the next part of the code will be. But to quickly explain, typical shading follows this rule, where we essentially have a gradient from black to white. Just a really simple gradient. However, toon shading, as some of you may know, doesn't follow this logic. Instead, follows the logic of going from the darkest value, so in this case our darkest value is black, to the second darkest value, so a blackish gray, right, to a kind of gray, or rather a slightly darker gray, right, to a gray. Then maybe we go into kind of a lighter gray. into kind of an almost white, maybe. And then we go into a white. So this is how toon shading works, right? Where we go from a dark value and then we go, instead of gradienting to the next value, we go from that darkest value to the next darkest value to the next one to the next one to the next one, next one, and so on and so forth. Think of this part of the code, so this part of the code right here, as the different tints of color that we have. So if you want a better way to kind of organize this, what we can do is we can create a comment from the selection, and we can call this our white tint. Okay? Perfect. So now we just want to drag this out a little bit so we have some space. So you might notice though that, wait a minute, if this is just our white tint, where are the rest of them? Well, we're going to have to copy and paste this code quite a bit. But this code is pretty much going to remain the same, so don't worry too much. All we're going to do is, first, we're going to want to break this link really quick, just so I don't confuse you guys. And now we're going to want to copy and paste this a few times. I would recommend that you do this for as many tints as you want, but what I typically like to do is about 5 of them. Okay? So 5 tints. And then we're going to want to change the name of these tints to their corresponding names. So we're going to call this one our, maybe we can call this our highlights, right? Maybe we can call this our medium tint, right? We can call this our, over here, our dark tint. And then we can call this one down here our shadow tint. Okay? So, as you might expect, however, we can't have all of these values just be the same, right? It wouldn't make a lot of sense. So what we're going to want to do instead is, first things first, we need to drag in our different values again. So one of the things you need to do is you need to remove this addition point. So this addition point right here doesn't need to be part of your code. But why is this? We still do need an A if A is over B value. So what we do instead is, for A over B value, we just plug in the previous tint's result from the if statement. So we plug in this if, and this is now our new A if A is over B value. And we just keep doing this all the way down until we reach our final tint. Okay? And then our A value is, again, our addition value. So we just plug all of that in. Just keep plugging your add into your A value for each of your if statements. So again, just as a quick explanation, since I know that was a lot, this addition right here, this addition is going to be the A value for all of your if statements. All of your if statements here, all of your tint if statements, that's going to be the A value. And then instead of using this addition here, this add here as your A is over B value, use the results from each of your previous tint if statements as your A is over B value. Okay? Pause here for a second if you just need to take a look at the code. And I'm just going to keep scrolling down just in case. Perfect. Now, once you're done with this, what we're going to want to do is, wait a minute, all of these values are the same value. How are we going to differentiate? Well, now we have to change our values. I'm just going to really quickly change each of these values. But first things first, just to make this a little easier, we can convert these to parameters to name them. We're going to call this, We're going to call this parameter white. We're going to call this parameter white threshold. And this parameter over here, convert this to a parameter. We're going to call this parameter white tint. Okay? And you're going to want to go down the line calling these each of their selective, of their names. So we're going to call this our highlight threshold. We're going to call this one our convert to a parameter. And we'll call this our, I'm going to call this our highlight tint. Then next one, of course, is going to be our convert to parameter. This is going to be our medium threshold, and our convert to a parameter, medium tints, convert to parameter, dark threshold, parameter, dark tints, parameter, shadow, threshold, perfect. Convert this parameter, shadow, tint. Perfect. And now we have all of our tints up, all of these things named and listed off. So what we want to do now is we're going to change the values of each of these individual things. So highlight threshold, we're going to want to change the default value from 7.5 to 4.4. We're going to want to change the tint from a 3.3 to a, or sorry, 3.5 to a 2.0. Our medium tint, or medium threshold rather, we're going to want to change that from a 7.5 to a 1.3, and our medium tint, a 1.25. Our dark threshold, we're going to want to change that from a 7.5 to an 0.7. And we're going to change our tint to an 0.75. And then our shadow threshold is going to be our lowest value at 0.3. And our shadow tint is going to be an 0.5. So now, if we plug in this result just quickly, you'll see here, hey, toon shading. There we go. All of our different values have kind of been split up. Nice. However, you can still see here that first off, our skybox is still gone and doesn't really exist. So we kind of need to fix that. We also need to make sure that we fix for the color, as everything's still kind of desaturated and monochrome, thanks to these two over here. So how do we fix this? Well, first things first, before we do any of that, I know I just inputted a lot of values, so just in case you want a quick overview of all the different values, here are all the different values. Feel free to pause the screen and look at the parameters here. I'm just going to extend out the screen so you know what all the names are. Once again, remember, you're changing your thresholds and your tints. These are all the different parameters for all of those. Perfect. So now that we've all put in our highlight thresholds and our highlight tint values, what we're going to want to do in order to fix our skybox and our color is we're going to want to resaturate our screen. So how do we do this? Well, first things first, drag out from your shadow tint from your if statement into another desaturation. Don't worry, this won't further desaturate your screen. It's just so we can get the color values back. Next, drag this out into a multiply. From there, we're going to want to drag out from another multiply. We're going to want to change our B value to 0.5. We're going to want to normalize our A value from a vector input. And our vector input this time, as you might have guessed, is a scene texture. The scene texture is going to be our post-process input 0. Perfect. Now then, what we're going to want to do from here is we're going to drag up into one final if statement. If this is going to be, if our A is less than B, you're going to want to break this link right here. For A, our A value is going to be a scene depth, not a scene texture, but a scene depth. Okay. So just make sure you get that right. From the scene depth, we're going to go into another value as our B value. This value needs to be pretty large, something about 200,000. I know it seems like it's a lot, but this is because this is how we're correcting, this part right here is how we're correcting for our skybox. This part right here. And then finally, if our A is more than B, we have scene texture. And then this is going to be another post-process input 0. Just gonna organize things up a little bit for everybody. Drag this out a little bit, just so this is all organized. So right here, I'm just going to do a bit of commenting, just so everybody knows what's what. So right here, we're fixing for our color. So correcting color. I could probably spell that a little better. Correcting color. And finally, we are create comment from selection. Correcting skybox right here. Perfect. So now if we apply this and save it, and we go back to our post-process volume, remember we need to add a post-process material, asset reference, drag in ToonShade post-process, and hey look, now our entire screen has toon shading. Pretty cool. But let's say, for example, we can take this a bit further. Let's say, for example, you want to make it to where this effect can only affect certain objects. Well, we can do that too with this material. So how do we do it? Well, in case you want to have that functionality where you can apply it to certain objects only, we're going to want to make, again, another if statement. I know quite a few. This if statement is going to be if our A is over B. Break the link here. If A is over B. Okay. I'm just going to break this link here just so we can see a little bit better. And then now we're going to have a few different scene textures. So bear with me. So create a scene texture. And then just kind of copy about, we're going to need 3 scene textures here. 3 different ones. So one of these is going to be scene texture, search up custom depth. One of these is going to be scene texture, post-process input 0. And one of these is going to be scene depth. This is different from this scene depth. Make sure you have specifically this screen texture scene depth. Okay. Next, we're going to want to drag out from scene depth a mask, component mask, red and green. You don't need to change the default values on this. This is fine. Drag that into our A. Next, we're going to have another one, mask, another mask for a custom depth. Drag that into our B value. And then our post-process input 0 is going to be if our A is less than B. And this is going to be our toggle effect on certain objects. Perfect. Now, if we plug that into our emissive color, you can see here, we don't have any more toon shading. What's up with that? Well, now you can see that we don't have any more toon shading. But let's say, for example, oh, sorry, I'm just going to turn on the pixelation here so we can see things a little easier. But let's say we want to have toon, or let's say we want to disable toon shading rather, sorry. Well, or enable it, whatever. One of the things we can do is we can search up something called custom depth. Render custom depth. If we unclick this, we are no longer toon shading everything. But if we want to actually render everything. Render custom depth. Click this on. There you go. Now we can toon shade whatever we want to. So again, this option here is all we're going to do is we just click on an object, render custom depth. If we click it off, we are no longer toon shading. If we click it on, we are toon shading. There you go. As simple as that. So, just a quick overview of what we did again today. We created a simple color change. We have our pixelation post-process, and we showed you how to create an instance for it. You can also create an instance for your toon shade post-processing. It should be pretty easy, but I won't show you guys how to do that. It should be pretty simple and self-explanatory at this point. And yeah, that's kind of what we did today. We created cell shading, pixelation, and a basic color change for whatever objects you might have. It's a really simple, really easy way to, shaders are a really simple, really easy way for us to create just super unique and cool effects without having to, go through the kind of time-consuming task of actually, making it to where we have to go through, making toon shading on textures or anything like that, or you have to change the colors of our textures or manually, anything like that. Shaders allow us to kind of do that all on its own. And yeah, I hope that this kind of got you guys interested in the field of technical art and shaders, or computer graphics in general. As you may or may not know, we have a computer graphics course here at Ontario Tech University. I highly recommend that you guys take that course if you have not already. It will help to teach you guys the basics of computer graphics. And yeah, thank you all for listening. Your task this week is going to essentially just recreating any two of these effects. You can recreate either the pixelation post-process effect, or you can recreate the basic color change effect, or the toon shading effect. Just make sure you create at least two of them. Thank you all for listening. Hope you guys had a great day.